Welcome or welcome back. I know there's been some time since my last video, and for that I'm sorry. I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys, and the reason I haven't posted anything is simply because I haven't felt like it. My mood has been low and so on. I do have these creator slumps, the same way as people have reading slumps, where I just don't feel like creating new content at all, and usually I just don't pressure myself. But now I'm back, and I'm back with the boom, because this video will be the ultimate thriller guide. My all-time favorite genre is thrillers, but more so YA thrillers. I have read maybe 100 YA thrillers, possibly more, and I'm never ever gonna be sick and tired of YA thrillers. So let's get started. First up, we have the Truly Devious series by Maureen Johnson. This is one of my all-time favorite series, and the reason is because this is a YA thriller and it's dark academia theme. In the original series, we have 3 books, starting out with Truly Devious, of course, and as you can see, I have tabbed all the books. The series follows Stevie Bell, who's this true crime genius, if you can say so. She's invited to study at the prestigious Ellingham Academy for the Gifted. And the reason for this is because many years ago a disappearance and murder happened at Ellingham Academy, and it's still unsolved. In hope of finally solving this case, they have then invited Stevie Bell to study at the academy and take on solving the case herself. It all started all those years ago when the headmaster Ellingham's wife and daughter suddenly went missing. And what makes this so interesting is that the only clue was a mocking riddle signed with Truly Devious. So in this series we follow Stevie Bell, as I said, and there's different mysteries in all these books. What really made me buy these books is the maps, because there's maps in these books. There's usually not maps in thriller books, but Maureen Johnson, she loves maps. Just look at this piece of art. It makes you want to read it, right? It's pretty. The next series that I'm gonna talk about is None Shall Sleep by Ellie Marney. Ellie Marney has become my new favorite author, and these books are the reason why. This is a trilogy with the last book finally out now in February, and the books follow Emma Louise and Travis Bell. Emma Louise and Travis Bell are both true serial killer survivors, and they're invited to the FBI to help solve serial killer cases, or rather teen serial killer cases. They usually just work on cold cases and going in to interview juvenile serial killers and get them to talk, but suddenly they're all wrapped up in an ongoing active case where a serial killer exclusively hunts teenagers. It all begins to unravel when Emma and Travis have to turn to the most notorious serial killer in the country, Simon Gutmanson. This is basically Criminal Minds in book form and for young adults. I love Criminal Minds, and so I ate this book up. I ate this series up in a whole. But don't be fooled. I know it's YA, but it's pretty gruesome. We have some detailed descriptions of death and bodies and unalivings. So be prepared. It's not for the softies, even though it's YA. And since we're talking about Criminal Minds inspired books, let's jump straight into The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. We've all heard of Jennifer's series The Inheritance Games. Well, this one is prior to that series, and it's way better. It's a 4-book series. I only own the 2 first, but I read them all. Throughout the series, we follow the new FBI case-solving team, which is teenagers only. We first meet Cassie, who's natural at reading people, kinda like in Criminal Minds with the profilers. She can take one look at you and she can tell you your entire life story, most likely. One day, the FBI comes knocking at her door, telling her about this new program where they're collecting exceptional teenagers like Cassie herself, who has these natural gifts. The group of teens consists of Cassie, Dean, Michael, and Leah. Cassie is, as I said, a profiler. That's her power. And Dean is also a profiler. Leah is a human lie detector and she can tell when everyone's lying. She can also mask herself lying. So whenever she's lying, she makes it seem like she's not. Michael, on the other hand, is an expert at reading emotions. He can easily sense anger and other emotions in people. Last but not least, we have Sloane. She's a natural at analyzing everything and she has a photographic memory. This means that when going over case notes, she can figure out everything that happens just from reading the file. And she's also a human calculator. She's great at math. And so all these teenagers are picked up and put together in this house where they're going to live and solve cold cases. Of course, the same as the last series I mentioned, they're suddenly wrapped up in an ongoing active case. And well, things start to happen and you just have to read it to know what's going on. If you know me, you knew this series was gonna pop up at any moment. This is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is by far my favorite series in this world. And Holly Jackson is my favorite author. This is a trilogy that follows Pip Fitz-Amobi and her solving cases that no one else can solve. This entire series exists because of something that happened 5 years ago. 5 years ago, Andy Bell was killed by her boyfriend, Sal Singh. The police knows he did it and everyone in town knows he did it. Pippa, on the other hand, she's not so sure. She's grown up in this town with the same people. She's been around Sal Singh and Andy Bell a lot of times and she just can't wrap her head around Sal being able to murder Andy Bell. When there's time to choose the topic for her final project in high school, she chooses to investigate this case. She starts to uncover secrets that someone in town desperately wants to stay hidden. And if the real killer is still out there, how far are they willing to go to stop Pip from finding out the truth? Okay, so this book is Pip trying to solve this murder even though it is solved, but she doesn't believe that Sal Singh killed Andy Bell. So the first thing that Pip does in this book is go straight to Sal Singh's family to talk to them and say, I don't believe Sal Singh killed Andy Bell. And this book is so good, so good. Each book in the series takes on this new case, but there is still elements from book 1 that keeps on popping up in the other books. So you gotta read the series from book 1 to book 3 in order. I can't even begin to explain how much I love these books. It's inputted into my DNA at this point. One thing that I did not mention is that A Good Girl's Guide to Murder is actually the name of Pip's podcast, because of course she makes a podcast about solving this case. And so we have a lot of production logs from her working on the podcast and interviewing people for her podcast. It's all just very exciting, and she keeps up the podcast for the other books as well. Then we have The One of Us is Lying trilogy by Karen M. McManus. I totally forgot to mention, but this series, along with A Good Girl's Guide to Murder I just talked about, has both been adapted into TV series streaming on Netflix. Unfortunately, this one was cancelled after 2 seasons. This book is about a group of teenagers who all suddenly find themselves in detention together. What's interesting about this specific group of people is that they're all so different. They're basically never hung out before this detention. While they're all seated in detention, things begin to happen. Suddenly, Simon begins to cough and retch and he's on the floor convulsing. And Bronwyn, as the star student she is, she realizes that Simon has a nut allergy. They all try to find his EpiPen. They can't find it. They try everything to save him, but unfortunately it's all in vain. Simon ends up dead and the rest of the group in detention becomes prime suspects in his murder case. And the reason is because Simon has this online forum where he posts about everyone's secrets. And not only 24 hours after his death, he was gonna post secrets about the students in detention. So who really did kill Simon? We had 5 people in this room. One of them is dead. Which one of the 4 did the killing? I read this book as one of the first books I read when I came back to reading, and I loved it. I also loved the Netflix show, and I'm so angry that they cancelled because they deviated from the books, so it ended on a cliffhanger and no one knows what happens next. This series doesn't follow the same characters throughout, and in book 2 we actually follow Bronwyn, which I mentioned, Bronwyn's little sister and her friends. We do have some cameos of the characters in book 1, but mostly it's her little sister and her friends. The people from book 1 and book 2 all teams up in the last book. Now let's move on to this monstrosity. This is the Stalking Jack the Ripper series by Kerry Maniscalco, the same author that wrote Kingdom of the Wicked series. Throughout this entire series, we follow Audrey Rose and Thomas Creswell. The thing about this series is that a lot of people just think of it as dark academia, which it is because it takes place in the 1800s, around the same time as Jack the Ripper. The main theme in these books is Audrey Rose wanting to be a forensic scientist. And since it's the 1800s, girl can't really go to school, they can't study. So she's studying under her uncle, which is a forensic scientist. And I just have to show you, because this is the first page. How intriguing isn't that picture? That catches my eye, honestly. I'm very passionate and very interested in medicine and forensic science, so this book is right up my alley. And as you could tell maybe from the title, Audrey Rose and Thomas, they try to solve Jack the Ripper case. Suddenly there's a lot of women murdered in cold blood in London, and the victims are sent to Audrey Rose's uncle to be examined. Of course, Audrey Rose and Thomas, both studying under her uncle, are also doing the autopsies of these bodies. The killer of this woman terrorizes the city and everyone is scared shitless, understandably. And Audrey Rose and Thomas takes it upon themselves to solve this case and catch the murderer. And they do so by using clues found during the autopsy of the women. Book 2, which is Hunting Prince Dracula, is my favorite. As you can maybe tell from the title, they're not in London anymore. So they travel around the globe in all 4 books, and in the last book they're actually in America. And if you like me and love true crime, we all know the story about America's first serial killer. Guess who shows up? So in book 2, my favorite, they're in Romania, and there's even a map. We all love maps. So go read this series right now because it's amazing. And with that, we are now wrapping up the YA thriller series and going to continue on the YA thriller standalones. Let's start with the author Ravina Guran. She has written now 3 YA thrillers standalones, and I have 2 of them. The last one actually came out today, I think, February 18th. The first book was This Book Kills. This book starts when one of the most popular and richest kids in school ends up dead, and everyone wonders who could have done it. The main character Jess is under strict instruction not to get into trouble, because then she'll lose her scholarship. Of course, she finds herself in the center of the investigation when it turns out that the story she wrote is actually describing the murder that just happened. So, the popular and rich kid in school died in the same way as one of the characters in Jess's short story. And that's kind of tricky to get out of. That's until Jess receives an anonymous text message thanking her for the inspiration. I feel like this book is perfect if you like The Good Girl's Guide to Murder or those kind of books. And my favorite type of YA thrillers happens at school, which this one does, so of course I loved it. And there's a map. You all know now that I love maps in thrillers. She's also written Catch Your Death. I was lucky to receive this one as an ARC, and I loved it. This is a lot different from the first book that I showed you, because this is a very traditional locked-in mystery, where every character is forced to stay in the same area because of, for example, a snowstorm, which is the case in this book. Here there's 3 girls who are stranded at the Bramble estate during a snowstorm. And suddenly there's of course a murder. Someone has poisoned the lady of the house, Emily. Which means the girls are now trapped in the house with a killer and a murder to solve. I'm usually not a fan of this locked-in trope, but I really enjoy this book. And it's Easter is coming up, and this is the perfect Easter book. Especially if you're in Scandinavia, because Scandinavians have this, or at least Norwegian people have this tradition of reading mystery books during Easter crime, we call it. So this one is at least perfect to read during winter, because of course it's set during winter, and it's just perfect. Then we're back with another Holly Jackson book. This is the reappearance of Rachel Price, and it's a standalone. When 18-year-old Belle was only 2 years old, her mother suddenly disappeared. Belle was the only witness to her mother's disappearance, but she can't remember anything. So now 16 years later, Belle's mom is long gone and presumed dead. But suddenly the case is dragged up from the past when the Belle family agrees to join this true crime documentary. Belle is sick and tired of this case being dragged up all the time, and she can't wait for it all to end and go back to normal. And then suddenly the impossible happens. Her mother reappears, live and well. Her mother Rachel comes up with this crazy story of how she vanished and reappeared, and Belle doesn't believe a word of it. And so the true crime documentary keeps on filming because this is the breakthrough of the century, and while the cameras are rolling, Belle tries to uncover the truth about her mother's disappearance. This was such a good book, and of course I loved it because I love Holly Jackson, but this was so much darker than A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, if you don't count the last book. I'm not gonna say anything more. And this was a lot more psychological thriller than A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Because there's not really any murders. It's her mother who's disappeared and then she reappears and she has to find out what really happened all those years ago. And there's a lot of family secrets, family feuds. I do really recommend everyone reading this book. Then we have the last of the YA thriller standalones, which is Karen M. McManus standalones. We talked about her One of Us is Lying series in the series section, but she also writes a lot of standalones. And they're all so pretty, with spread edges and everything. Of all these books, I don't really recommend The Cousins. I don't know if you read We Were Liars, but it's kind of the same concept, and I was not a fan of that book, neither of this one. So let's get back to the books that I'm really recommending. First out, we have You'll Be the Death of Me. This is about Ivy, Matteo, and Cal, who used to be close friends in middle school. For some reason, they all split up and haven't talked since. But then one day, they all run into each other in the hallway, and they all decide to skip school like they did back in the day. But they're not the only ones skipping school that day, and when they spot their classmate Brian, they decide to follow him into the city. He acts very suspiciously, and so they follow him into this abandoned building, only to stumble right into a murder scene. And not any murder scene, it's their classmate Brian who's dead. As it turns out, Ivy, Matteo, and Cal still has something in common. They all have a connection to the dead kid Brian. And they're all hiding something. I feel like Karen M. McManus is the YA version of Frida McFadden. All her books are very entertaining, they're short and they're fast paced, and so I definitely recommend you pick up Karen M. McManus' book. Then let's move on to Nothing More to Tell, which is my second favorite from Karen M. McManus. 4 years ago, Bryn left town after the shocking murder of her favorite teacher, a story that made headlines after the teacher's body was found by 3 of her students. The case was never solved, but Bryn is sure that the 3 kids who found the body hide something. Especially her ex-best friend Trip, he definitely hides something. Now Bryn is moving back into town to start her dream internship at a true crime show. And with that internship, she is determined to find out what really happened. When Bryn starts to investigate what really happened in the woods that day, she discovers a lot of secrets. Secrets that may change everything. Okay, so I really enjoyed this book. I gave this 4 stars and I read it in a few hours maybe. I read all her books in a few hours honestly because they're so exciting. What I really liked about this book was Bryn working at a true crime show. I'm a sucker for true crime, so that really interested me and made me want to read this book. Then it's the last book of Karen M. McManus, and this one is my favorite. And this is called Two Can Keep a Secret. The title gives very Pretty Little Liars vibes, and I think the book in itself also gives a lot of Pretty Little Liars vibes. And we all love Pretty Little Liars. The main character, Ellery, has never been to the small town of Echo Ridge, but she's heard all about it. Her aunt went missing there when she was 17 years old in 1996. She was just walking home from the library when she didn't make it home. And only 5 years ago, a homecoming queen's murder put the town on the map again. And now Ellery has to move to town to live with a grandmother she barely knows. This town is picture perfect, but of course it's hiding a lot of secrets. And now 5 years after the last murder, the killer strikes again and another girl goes missing. This town is filled with secrets. Ellery has them, her mother has them, and her grandmother has them, and everyone else in town does too. And the longer she stays in town, the clearer it is that everyone there is hiding something. I gave this book 5 stars, and I'm pretty sure sure it's because of the Pretty Little Liars vibes, because I love Pretty Little Liars, but the book in itself is very good. So if you like Pretty Little Liars, you should definitely go pick up this book. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed recording this video and talking about YA thrillers with you guys, because it's really my biggest passion on this earth. I do think I want to make a adult thriller reading guide as well, because I also read a lot of adult thrillers. So comment down below if you want me to do something like that, because I'll definitely do it. And with that, I want to say thank you for watching this video, and thank you for sticking with me even though I suck at posting YouTube videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye.